Around 2011, Jerry Thompson was advocating builds very similar to this. The exact builds of Bug fluctuate a lot, some Delver, some not. The various control skeletons all a little bit different, but Tenjum is a big fan of the Shardless Bug build, and he's piloted it again today.
Yeah, some with True Name Nemesis, some without it, as the deck that did win Grand Prix Paris did not have True Name Nemesis. It varies, obviously, on how you want to go about building the deck. Now, Shardless Bug, of course, as you mentioned, using Ancestral Vision, Shardless Agent, Baleful Strix, Tarmogoyf, and all the other spells that it does opt to use along with Abrupt Decay. So we've seen this strategy before. We've also seen Lee's deck in Esper Deathblade quite a bit as well. You think of that deck, you think of Brian Bronwyn, you think of Todd Anderson, players who've had a lot of success with this sort of strategy. Basically an Esper deck that splashes Deathrite Shaman.
And again, the specifics of these decks really vary a lot. There's a lot of room for customization. You see so many cards with Ponder and Brainstorm that there's room to play a lot of singletons, and so a lot of room for customization.
So we're underway here with a Thoughtseize from Tenjum. He did lead off with a Polluted Delta into a Deathrite Shaman, a common start that we'll see here in Legacy. Lee is going to respond with a Brainstorm. So 1, 2, and 3. The cards drawn are Deathrite Shaman, Spell Pierce, and Force Will. Those will go to the grip. He'll put 2 back, and it looks like that Thoughtseize is likely going to resolve. And we'll see exactly what Lee's working with and what he opts to hide here.
Now, the biggest cost for building the Shardless Bug version is that once you have Shardless Agent in your deck, you really don't want to play with situational 1 and 2 mana spells. So a lot of the soft counters like Daze and Spell Pierce that give control decks the ability to defend themselves have to be removed from this list because cascading into a counter spell is about as bad as it gets.
It looks like we may have Lee here with just a 1-lander. You see his hand, he's got a Liliana the Veil, a Vindicate, 2 copies of Stoneforge Mystic, a Deathrite Shaman, a Spell Pierce, and that Force of Will. Could have opted to Force of Will this Thoughtseize, but chose not to willingly. So we'll see what his hand is. He put 2 cards back, and I don't think there was a land among them.
Yeah, one would assume against a Thoughtseize that you would just hide spells and not lands. And if Andrew has a Wasteland here, Lee could be really pushed out of this game quite fast.
So let's see what our 6th ranked player on the leaderboard wants to take. He's going to go with the counter spell. So no more Force Will here for Lee. We'll see if Tenjum has anything else to do in his second main phase.
And there's Wasteland.
That is pretty good.
So if our instinct is correct that Lee has no second land, then this is brutal, obviously, for Lee.
He was relying on Brainstorm to get him there. It did not, obviously, and this is a brutal Wasteland. And if you're new to Legacy, ooh, wow, we see a concession right away. Jeez.
Even by my standards, that's a fast concession.
You love to pack it in, and that is, wow.
There's nothing I love more than conceding possibly still winnable games, and so Lee with a play out of my playbook.
What you guys don't see at home is I was actually writing down Lee's hand to be able to keep track for you at home. I have, Liliana. I've got my shorthand of 2 Stoneforge, a Pierce, a Vindy. I'm just going to cross all of those off now as I'm not going to be needing this sheet of paper anymore. As Andrew Tenjum does win game number 1 on turn 2 here without a combo deck. We're going to take a look at Lee's sideboard. I've got that in front of me. Outside of needing to draw lands, he's got 3 copies of Rest in Peace, 2 Meddling Mage, an Attention Sphere, a Pithing Needle, 2 Ethersworn Canonist, a Flusterstorm, 2 copies of Supreme Verdict, a Zealous Persecution, a Notion Thief, and a Vendilion Click. He's got, this is part of the reason I actually don't like the concession is because he doesn't actually know what he's up against.
Yeah, I mean, he has a pretty good idea that it's probably Bug, but that opening could also just be Esper Blade as well.
Yeah, I mean,
Underground Seed, Thoughtseize, Deathrite Shaman, Wasteland, all could be potentially in a Deathblade list as well.
Now, what land did Tenjum search for with the Polluted Delta?
An Underground Seed.
Okay, so it can't be Jund.
Yes.
Cannot be Jund. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I guess you can put a range of what decks you're playing. It's most likely to be Bug since Bug is growing in popularity, but he doesn't know he's against the Shardless version. He doesn't know if he's against Delver, if he's against the version that won Grand Prix Paris that doesn't even have True Name. Lee's got no idea. So, speculative sideboarding here. I can tell you the options. I have no idea how he's going to sideboard because, again, I don't really think he's got a great idea of what he's up against.
The thing is, he knows that he's in a normal, fair matchup one way or the other. Whether it's Shardless Bug or Delver or even Esper Blade, he knows he's not playing against a combo deck at least. So that guides a little bit of his sideboarding. But
sure,
it is a little bit up in the air. On Tenjum's side, he has a Force of Will in his sideboard. He has 3 main deck and then 1 in the sideboard. 2 Golgari Charms, 4 Hymn to Torox, a Maelstrom Pulse, 2 Massacres, 2 Nile Spell Bombs, a Notion Thief, and 2 Vendilion Clicks. I think the Notion Thief certainly comes in here. I think the 4 Hymn to Thorax are pretty reasonable. I imagine Hymns probably come in every matchup that isn't a really creature-oriented fast matchup. And additional removal like Maelstrom Pulse as well.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, the Tenjum actually has the benefit of knowing what he's up against because of that Thoughtseize. So he knows he's up against a Stoneforge Mystic deck. Doesn't know if he's playing against True Name Nemesis. I think he's going to assume that he is. There are 3 copies here in Prost deck list. But, hasty concessions are certainly something that we do see happen when we're doing coverage. And, there is a method to the madness with a hasty concession where you don't want your opponent to know what you're playing, or you just know that the games are going to take a little while, so it's better to just concede and move along. I think if I'm in Lee's spot there, I don't know if I'm going to win, and I know that my next 2 draws aren't lands, but I want to get some info.
Right. It's possible, these 2 players might have sat next to each other during a round. Maybe Lee is familiar with Andrew Tenjum playing this sort of deck in the Open Series, so Lee may have a better idea than we're assuming, but I do agree with your assessment. It does seem a little fast.
Creeping Tar Pit is going to start things off here for Lee. His second turn is going to play a Meddling Mage. Tenjum just suspended Ancestral Vision on turn 1, and we'll find out what, I want to say Chris Pakula, but that's not him, is naming. And he's going to choose Abrupt Decay. You think Chris would be mad if I called that Chris Pakula?
Yeah, he'd be furious.
Okay, I had a feeling.
Chris might be watching.
There's a very high chance of that, actually. He loves the bird some coverage. As we do have a Misty Rain for us here from Tenjum. Tenjum going to go down to 19. Once again, Abrupt Decay is what Meddling Mage is naming.
And we'll see what Lee's plan is here against this Ancestral Visions. A lot of players' instinct would have just been to name Ancestral Visions with the Meddling Mage. Of course, Andrew has a reasonable amount of removal. It's unlikely for this Meddling Mage to stick around for several turns. So naming something like Abrupt Decay is totally legitimate. But he does have to have a plan here. I don't know if it's to win very quickly before Visions can come off. I don't know if it's to try to find another copy of Meddling Mage. But if he doesn't apply a lot of pressure or lock out Tenjum somehow, that Ancestral Vision is a huge threat.
Well, there's a Tarmogoyf. And we will get our Tarmogoyf die out there for you guys in a little bit. But I'm not sure how much we're going to need it because Prost does have a copy of Rest in Peace in his hand. In combination with the True Name Nemesis and the Sword of Fire and Ice that he's holding, he's doing really well this game as opposed to the last one. And he is going to play True Name Nemesis.
And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the Tenjum has Massacre in his hands.
Okay.
So
that is nice.
We might see another fast concession.
Yeah, the aptly named card here in Massacre. That is certainly going to be timely, as you do see the Nemesis. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Nemesis uncommon.
Correct. Did a lot of work against Rebels in Standard. I believe Tenjum is probably asking if his Tarmogoyf survives. My understanding is yes, it does.
That's right, based on state-based.
It's a state-based rule, but when the Massacre actually resolves, Massacre will be in the graveyard. Tarmogoyf will be a 2/3, and they get -2/2.
That is correct. It's the old ruling with Wildfire and Magnivore.
Sure.
Remember that one for all you old school guys that used to play during that standard format and like to make sure that your opponent didn't get to cast spells. It was a fun thing for me.
Yeah. Because who knows what they're liable to do once they can cast spells.
Yeah,
it could be anything.
No. Just make sure they never have more than 2 lands. They can't do anything of relevance. I think those days are long gone. I don't think we're going to see Stone Rain come back for a while.
Yeah. And you can see, Disperse and those similar cards. Better understanding by R&D instead of Eye of Nowhere. It's why put non-land on it? Well, if someone's using that card to bounce a land, it's probably for a bad reason.
Yes. As now here is Massacre placed onto the stack. A freebie! He's able to pay the alternate cost because Tenjum does have a swamp and the opponent has a plains. And they're checking here, and I believe that Tarmogoyf should live.
Yeah.
So it is my assumption that he probably asked the ruling on that, but I am pretty confident that Tarmogoyf should live.
Yeah.
And we are going to check right now. Hopefully, we should be pausing the game.
Maybe this works differently, but you bolt a Tarmogoyf with no instant in the graveyard, and it's a 2/3. It's a 3/4 and survives.
Yeah.
And not sure why Massacre would be different.
Yeah, for all of you Twitter followers out there, you can feel free to fire away, but we're pretty confident on this one. That's how that should work.
I mean, I assume if Tenjum consulted the judge, it may work differently than the way that you and I understand it.
Yeah.
So we'll get clarification on this.
Yeah. And the judge is going to verify, so we'll put the match on pause. Not sure if we're going to move to another match or bring it back to the booth here, but again, explaining the ruling there, you explained it best, I think, with lightning bolt on a Tarmogoyf.
Yeah. So I don't know why it would be different here exactly, but I've learned with Legacy to err on the side of caution. A lot of cards are worded a little bit differently. You know, an example I go to a lot was Tabernacle and Merit Lage. You don't actually have to pay because Tabernacle destroys. Not exactly intuitive, and so I've learned kind of not to assume functionality.
Yeah, you think that Tabernacle, if you don't pay the one, you have to sacrifice the creature, but Tabernacle actually says it gives the creature, if you don't pay the one, destroy that creature, which is a little bit backwards, obviously. So because of that, when there's Merit Lage in play, you don't even have to pay the one, because you can't destroy an indestructible creature, obviously, and you're just good to go, which, unsurprisingly, Ken and Haas knew that interaction with his deck.
Yeah, no hesitation.
Yeah, I'm not even consider paying the upkeep because I don't need to do that. So,
and that's a place where actually, if I could recommend anything to aspiring tournament player, it's definitely playing a lot of matches on Magic Online. Since Magic Online does it for you, you get a better understanding of rules and triggers and so forth.
Yeah, and they're going to bring it back to us here very briefly. So we get to see our smiling faces, Cedric Phillips, Patrick Sullivan, Star Stadium's Open Series here in St. Louis. Of course, we want to make sure that the integrity of the game is not compromised. We want to make sure everything's correct.
Yeah.
So that's why we're putting a pause in the game, making sure that the ruling is correct, the game state is accurate, and all of that good stuff. So.
And if we happen to be wrong, then it's an educational moment for us and for the viewers at home as well. So.
Yeah. And it's better, I think, that, they err on the side of caution when it goes with this particular, ruling and game state. And now you see Tarmogoyf appear on the table.
Ta-da!
There it is. It's like it never happened, but Rest in Peace is on the table now, too.
Sure.
So now the graveyards are going to go bye-bye. At least Rest in Peace is on the stack, I should say.
Or so it would appear.
Yeah, yes. So, we've got the Tarmogoyf die out there.
Dude, we still got it, by the way.
Yeah, we saw it.
We still got it.
We saw it. You can't get anything by us until you do. So there's that. Yeah. Now here's a Tundra from Lee. And that'll get exiled, of course. Follow-up is a Stoneforge Mystic, so he's still running on all cylinders here.
Yeah, the issue here is, that Ancestral Visions is really looming. Now, Lee does have a 5th land in hand in Batterskull, so even if the Stoneforge dies, this Batterskull could stick, and it's not the easiest card for Charlotte's Bug to answer. Again, it's outside of Abrupt Decay range and all that kind of stuff. So as badly as things are going for Lee, he kind of has a backdoor way of potentially winning this game if Tenjum simply doesn't have an answer to Batterskull.
Yeah, the clock is ticking on that Visions, though. It's always very scary, the fact that that's coming, because it is such an important card in these fair matchups, the advantage that it provides.
Yeah. Assuming that you have the time to deploy it and the cards you're drawing actually matter, you're not locked out by Chalice of the Void or something along those lines. Yeah. Ancestral Visions is a huge edge.
So, sacrifice blue to Delta will Tenjum. Of course, that'll go to the Exiled, because Rest in Peace is in play, so Tarmogoyf's not going to grow any, and Deathrite Shaman doesn't have any fuel for the fire. But Tenjum does have a copy of Maelstrom Pulse in his hand. It looks like he also has an Abrupt Decay as well. So the way that that's going to resolve, we'll make sure that everything goes in the appropriate zones, making sure Abrupt Decay goes into either the Exile or Graveyard. Same with Rest in Peace. And you see Tenjum being very careful to make sure that these are all in the appropriate zones with how resolution will take place.
Yeah. Since there's already been some confusion again.
Yeah. And so it looks like both cards are going to go in the graveyard, it looks like. Looks like Rest in Peace is actually going to go in the Exile zone. So this is going to move down to 1. And again, Tarmogoyf is going to be a 1-2 right now. Let's see what Tenjum has here. Maybe he's leading off with a Brainstorm. He is. It's a good place to start.
Now, Tenjum has a Maelstrom Pulse in hand. So the ideal scenario is he finds some other way to answer the Stoneforge Mystic, allowing him to keep Maelstrom Pulse, which can then answer the Batterskull.
Yeah. That's the goal in this situation.
Yeah, and keep in mind, we have an Ancestral about to come off too. So as long as Tenjum doesn't get basically punked out by this Batterskull, he should be in a pretty commanding position.
There's Tarmo. He's a 1-2. You see Brainstorm going to be resolving here momentarily as Tenjum deciding what 2 cards to put back on top. So now there's your Brainstorm in the graveyard. Tarmogoyf's going to move up to a 2-3 now. Or excuse me, still 1-2. Brainstorm and Abrupt Decay both instants. Correct myself there. Oh, 2-3 now.
So that's
That's
very,
like the perfect card, right?
very good for Tenjum that he was able to find that Abrupt Decay. Again, being able to hang on to that Maelstrom Pulse.
Tarmo coming in. Deathrite hanging back. Maybe a little surprised by that. He just passes the turn back. So Lee will take a draw. And he's going to Windmill slam down that Batter Skull, predictably. And this is where Maelstrom Pulse looks oh so good as a one-of.
Again, one of in the sideboard. It sort of seems like a weird one of, why would you want to have one of this catch-all removal spell? Again, it's just for fair matchups. Legacy has a lot of extreme decks, so you can only afford to play so many cards like this. And you look at so many cards as well that you can often find your one of through Ponders and Brainstorms and Ancestral and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's actually really nice to be able to have access to this effect. It's part of the reason that Esper Deathblade decks play a Vindicate for similar reasons, and this is just really just a better Vindicate. So there is a Misty Rainforest, so the Tenjum can play around Daze. Pulse will take care of the Batter Skull. We'll see Tarmogoyf shift up a little bit here to a 4-5. There will be Sorcery, Instant, Creature, and Artifact in the graveyard. Let's make it a land, so now a 5-6.
Yeah, Legacy's a format full of a lot of, weird cards and single card blocks and stuff like that, where control decks can draw a bunch of cards and gain a huge edge, but still not be able to beat the board for some random reason. And so having a one of Vindicate, a one of Maelstrom Pulse, gives you a catch-all, even if you wouldn't be able to necessarily say, I'm playing it for exactly this card. It's not really that sort of thing. It's just a catch-all for the random stuff that Legacy offers.
So let's see what's going to happen here. Here is an attack for 6. Prost is going to go down to 10. Now we'll probably see Deathrite start going to the graveyard to start firing away a little bit more damage that way, as another suspended Ancestral Visions will take place. Lee has a Snapcaster Mage and a Sword of Fire and Ice in his hand.
The old Snapcaster rest in peace deck.
You gotta slow down those Tarmogoyfs and Deathrite Shamans, or at least try. Now there is the sword. It looks like we do have updated life totals here for you guys, 17 to 11. As Tenjum is going to tick down that Visions and take a draw. Thoughtseize the spell drawn this turn. He also has a Notion Thief in his hand. Perhaps a little bit of a story to tell. As here is Thoughtseize. We'll see a response here with Snapcaster Mage. So Tenjum's going to end up taking 2 from that Thoughtseize, going down to 15. And of course, Lee has no cards to take, so basically shocking himself. But in reality, not really, because getting Snapcaster Mage out of the hand is actually pretty important.
And the information is really valuable, too, now that he's facing down that sword.
Yeah. Attack here from 5 from Tarmogoyf is going to put Lee down to 6. Let's see if Lee has anything to do. It looks like he has a copy of Golgari Charm in his hand, which would actually do a nice job of taking care of the Snapcaster Mage. Doesn't mean that it's, game over or anything, because Tenjum does have Creeping Tar Pit that he can suit up.
But this might be a little too slow. I mean, Lee is so close to death that even with more time, he might be able to finagle the board into such a place where he's able to eventually get his sword on the Creeping Tar Pit, but he just doesn't have very much time.
Yeah. So Lee's drawing a Stoneforge Mystic for the turn. You can really tell just from looking how Tenjum's deck is constructed and how he is sideboarded here, and just the way that he's played the game. He's played this matchup a time or two.
Yeah.
He had Massacre brought in immediately. He brought in Golgari Charm as well. Both those cards are fantastic in this matchup. As Snapcaster Mage tries to be equipped by Sword of Fire and Ice, but -1/-1 mode on Golgari Charm will stop that. So there goes Snapcaster Mage. Of course, Tenjum's creatures are a little bit smaller temporarily. Now here's a Stoneforge Mystic. See if Lee has any targets for this. Lee's going to take a look here.
Yeah, occasionally you see some decks board into a third piece of equipment in the post-board games, but the most common main deck configuration is to have 2. Usually it's a Batter Skull and either a Jitte or a Sword, depending on what your metagame expectations are.
Yeah, the Sword of Fire and Ice stock has really raised quite a bit recently because of Trinity Nemesis, both against it and with it.
Right. A lot more blue-red decks than than we've seen in previous months.
So with GT in hand, I think you may have to sacrifice and go down to 5 here. But your Stoneforge Mystic is on blocking duty anyway now. So he's in a lot of trouble easily.
Yeah, it's really hard for him to be able to beat both this enormous Tarmogoyf and the Deathrite Shaman.
Yeah. Coming from 2 different angles. That's part of the reason Deathrite's so good. And finally Banded Modern. There's GT. Okay, so he's just going to drop down 2 equipment and try to block here with Snapcat, or with Stoneforge. As Tenjum's going to activate the Shaman, remove an instant / sorcery, and deal lead 2, put him down to 3. Visions will tick down to 2. See Notion Thief there in Tenjum's hand as well. Let's see what spell this will be here.
I think he's going to lead off with the Shardless Agent. It gives him there's a lot of cards he can flip over right now to just win the game.
Yeah. There's Wasteland, Golgari Charm. That one, I don't think he cast that, right?
No,
There's a lot of cards, right? He's checking. Destroy target enchantment, nope. -1/-1, nope. And regenerate my creatures, maybe?
Sure, I
I guess, yeah.
I mean, it's another instant in the graveyard, right?
Yeah.
So, there's at least that.
And he decides, yeah, I'm just not going to bother casting this. We'll just shuffle those 2 cards to the bottom and move right along. As, of course, that Golgari Charm could provide to be useful later in the game. As Stoneforge Mystic is on chump blocking duty, of course. And Deathrite Shaman is now threatening lethal, so Lee's going to need a really good draw. Well, apparently he's got one as he knocks the top of his deck.
Does he have a Supreme Verdict type effect in his deck?
Well. Didn't see any of this. He's got 2 in the sideboard. Yeah, he didn't draw one, but he's going to activate Creeping Tar Pit and get in.
And this is not bad for Lee if he had a little bit more time.
Yeah.
But he's just too far under the gun.
Because the Tar Pit equip, hit with the GTA, that would put him to a virtual 7. But now he's going to go down to 1, which is virtual 5. And then Tarmogoyf will be able to clean up, as will Deathrite Shaman, as Tenjum's going to tick down that Visions to 1. He's going to get in with his 2 creatures, and that's going to do it. So Andrew Tenjum, number 6 on the Star City Games Open Series leaderboard, is going to win this match and move on to 5-0 with Old Faithful Shardless Bug. Lee Prost picks up his first loss. And again, it's tough to say if Lee would have won that first game, but maybe the hasty concession will come back to bite him.
I bet you he's not winning, but you're right insofar as the information is so valuable that, you should play out the game a little bit longer just to see what else is going on.